What up, fam, and welcome to Big Ray's Garage Grind Mental Health Edition. We are where you will hear from me and my guests about our thoughts and experiences with our own mental health and wellness journeys. And today is this month actually is also Mental Health Awareness Month, and so it's perfect timing for us to welcome in a new guest. I've been away from the mic a little bit, and so we thought this would be a great time to get back at it and have some conversations around mental health and its impact on us as men, as athletes, as fathers, as sons, what have you. So it's really great honor to welcome a third-round draft pick for the Detroit Lions in 2008. Was signed as a 2013 as a free agent with the Seattle Seahawks, and his career here with the Seahawks had 34.5 sacks, 13 forced fumbles, first in Seahawks history with 6.5 postseason sacks, which
nice.
speaks to being a closer. You know what I'm saying? It's important to close those games. 2016 Seahawks Man of the Year, 2016 Pro Bowler, Super Bowl 48 champion, and proud husband and father, Mr. Cliff Avril. Welcome to the show.
Man, thanks for having me. Hey, it's always good hearing about your stats. I didn't know some of those things, so that's good.
Sometimes people even ask me, as an offensive lineman, I don't have any stats, I got to ride with what the running backs did. So of course I'm always going to ride with Barry Sanders. It's on that line and we rushed for 2,000 yards, and it was actually during a contract year, so we had actually calculate how many yards he gained starting to the left side.
Oh, there you go.
Just so I can have, just so our brother can get some stats.
For sure, show some love.
Well, it's happy to have you on today, man. And this is an area that is super important to me. This mental health and wellness space. And before we get to it, to your journey a little bit, just want to just talk a little bit about where you are and where you're from and your Haitian descent, but
sir.
You grew up in Jacksonville, Florida.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Four-sport athlete.
Yeah. It's funny, even hearing four-sport athlete because, growing up, I didn't start really playing sports really until I got to high school.
Oh, wow.
I played a little bit of Betty basketball, and I played on the junior high team for basketball. But high school was when sports became a thing for me, and just talking through my upbringing, me being Haitian, and then also playing football was like, back in those times, my mom was not going for it. You know what I'm saying? So just being able to play that sport, and it was too brutal. I'm my mom's only child, of course. So,
right.
But combating, I think the hard thing for me growing up was just being able to combat between the American culture and being Haitian. You know what I'm saying? Because when I'm at home, we speak Creole, we eat the Haitian food, it's Haitian culture, everything. But as soon as we open those doors to go to school or to go into the world, now I'm American. You know what I mean? So now it's adjusting. Now we eating burgers and we're speaking English and all these different things. So it was a constant battle, but I didn't necessarily even realize it was just life for me.
Well, I will say this. I would love to be at the crib when it's non-American time.
Yeah.
Because all the food you just mentioned there just made this big dude hungry. You know what I'm saying? And I love myself a good burger, but I love all types of food too. You know what I'm saying? So,
good.
But here's the other question I want to ask real fast is that you were all-state in football and basketball in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
How did you choose football over basketball? And then how did you get Purdue get you out of the state of Florida?
So I was a late bloomer, and when I say a late bloomer, I was late at playing football. I didn't start playing football till 10th grade, and I actually got recruited by Purdue in particular, and a couple other schools. But they would come to my basketball games and just recruit me as an athlete.
I got you.
You know what I mean? 10th grade, I didn't necessarily play. I was just on the team 10th grade year. But 11th grade, for some reason, somehow, I just figured it out. I'm like, all I got to do is throw my body into people. You know what I'm saying? And I figured that piece out. They put me at defensive end, and I actually only played 6 games in my junior year. But when I say I crushed it, them 6 games, I was
crushed it.
I was making plays left and right, and I ended up breaking my leg. But then the word got around, and then teams would just come watch me play basketball that same season, and that's how it happened. But again, I was late, so a lot of the Florida schools, I guess I was late on their radar or whatever it may have been, and then some of the smaller schools were recruiting me, like UCF and some of those schools. But Purdue was the first one to give me a scholarship, and I knew going into school, I did not want a red shirt. That was my biggest thing. Like I wanted to hurry up and go to school, come back home to my mama. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the year I was going to Purdue, they had 9 guys get drafted off their defense.
Oh, wow.
So I knew push come to shove, I'd at least be second string. You know what I mean? And find my way. And I ended up starting midway through my true freshman year.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. Like just reading your story, how many things that we have in common. It's, I mean, it could be a conversation for another day, but it's similar thing in the recruiting trail for myself. But I saw also that speaking of your mom, that she didn't even know that you played football until she read it in the paper. Talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, man. So it's funny. So in the Haitian culture at that time, football was barbaric. Like that's the American sport. You're not playing that. And again, I'm my mom's only child.
Right.
So of course you're not playing that. Like you're my only baby. Like why would I let you go out there and get beat up by those kids or whatever? And so only reason I started playing football is because all my hoop friends was playing football, so I had nobody to hang out with, right?
I got you.
So I was like, all right, well, let's go try this football thing out. And like I said, I sucked, you know, my 10th grade year. I figured out my 11th grade year, and you know, this whole time my mom is thinking I'm going to basketball practice. She doesn't understand the seasons and different things like that. She just wanted to make sure I was off the streets, you know what I mean, doing something positive. And one of her coworkers came to work one time and showed her a newspaper and like, ain't this your son? And she's looking at me like, it's a newspaper. She's looking at her like, it's a newspaper? You talking about my son? What's going on with my baby? You know, she's thinking negative, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, he's player of the week. Like, he's actually pretty good at this football thing. He playing football? Like, what do you mean? Came home hollering like, what you doing playing football? And I'm like,
I'm pretty good at this.
I'm like, Mom, but I think I might actually be able to go to school off this. Like, she was like, they send kids to school for this sport? I was like, yeah, like I might actually be able to get a scholarship and all these different things. Then she was like, oh, okay, well, let's, because I sure as heck didn't know how I was going to go. I definitely wouldn't have been able to go to Purdue or nothing like that. So she allowed me to play, and it ended up being one of the best decisions we both got to make.
It is crazy, man. Like the more you talk to dudes and you kind of, because like my parents knew football, but they had no concept of what scholarships were. I didn't either. And so the coach was trying to explain it to me, and I'm just like, yeah, but my dad said you don't get anything for free, dog.
Yeah.
Like you're going to pay that bill's coming, and we can't pay it. And so it took my coach maybe 2 or 3 weeks to convince me, and then it took us like 2 months to convince my dad that they're going to pay for everything, and you don't have to pay it back.
Like you mean like everything? Like,
yeah,
no.
Because my dad's saying was like, free lunch is not even free.
Facts.
Somebody's paying for it. You know what I'm saying? And so like it took a while for them to convince my dad that scholarship meant that I'm going to get to go to school for free. Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot of things we have in common. We both spent our entire careers with the same 2 organizations. I started in Seattle and finished in Detroit. You started in Detroit and finished in Seattle. So what was your time like in Detroit? You know, I know when I was there, it was tough sledding, but
no different. Yeah. It was tough sledding. You know, I went 0-16 as a rookie. So that by itself, being one of the first teams to ever do that and be a part of something like that was brutal. You know, but I wouldn't change it for the world because it taught me what the NFL was really about. It showed me that the NFL is a business. It showed me that I got to be on my P's and Q's at all times. It showed me how to be a pro and how to approach the game. Now, I'm sure there's an easier route of showing me all those things than to go 0-16, but it was brutal. So my first 3 years in the league, I had 3 different D-line coaches. You know, I had 2 different head coaches at that time. So just understanding the dynamic of the league at that time was pivotal for me. But it was hard though, man. It was a lot of stressful days. Every Monday and Tuesday was extremely stressful my first 3 years because that's usually when they fire people. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So like the worst thing you can see is a 313 number pop up on your phone, and you're like, wait up, this is a facility calling? Like, what y'all want, Lord, please? You know what I mean? So, but it was a great experience looking back at it. But in the moment, though, man, a lot of stressful days.
Yeah, and you know, and Detroit's a tough place. You know, the fans there are deserving of something better. Hard-working, tough people.
Amazing
and so when you felt like you weren't like doing it for them, I mean, you felt it like in your soul a little bit. You know,
no doubt. And I mean, even the 0-16 year, like, people were showing up to games.
Right.
They might have been showing up with bags over their heads and stuff like that, but they were showing up to games. Like, the city would go crazy. I mean, we had one winning season while I was there, and the city went crazy over it. Like, those are some true hardcore fans. They just haven't had much to cheer about.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's I mean, I enjoyed my time in Detroit, blocking for Barry. And then the organization did well by me a few different times when some things were kind of happening in my life. And so I always feel indebted to them that way. But speaking of why we're here, like I said, this podcast is designed to be like a conversation with us just about our experiences with mental health and being men of color, being athletes, being coming from the NFL. So I'd like to kind of dig into some of that a little bit, and so I'd like to start out with when you first came into the league in 2008. What was the conversation around mental health, like in the locker room with buddies, like any kind of things like that?
No such thing. It wasn't a thing to talk about mental health. It wasn't. Honestly, it was one of those things like nobody really cares.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like just deal with whatever you got going on and come out here and make some plays. It wasn't much to be talked about. And it's interesting now to hear a lot of the talks about mental health. Now, I do think there is a fine line with some of that because I do feel like some of those mental hurdles that I had early on also allowed me to learn how to be a little bit tougher mentally, right? Mental toughness a little bit. Now I do understand there's a fine line between the two,
right?
But going through some of that stuff, some of those stressful days and different things like that allowed me to be able to weather the storm when things actually did get hard because I had already experienced some tough stuff already from that point.
So speaking of that, what would be, if you can think of something, like what would be an example of a situation like that you were maybe going through a tough time in the season, or you maybe weren't playing well, or there's some off the field kind of stuff that's impacting your play, where you felt like you showed the mental toughness to get through it, and then what did it take to do that, and then what did you learn from it?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I can choose so many different things from my Detroit days, but as I mentioned, I went 0-16 as a rookie. So the next year, another coach is coming in. Most coaches are not trying to have any player. They don't want to be associated with any player that went 0-16. So they want their own team, right? So that by itself is a challenge because now you got to prove to this coach that you deserve to be here. And for me, that following year, I think the hardest part about that year was it was a new head coach, new D-line coach. They're trying to weed guys out. Right, they're trying to, whether it's from the first day of OTAs and team workouts, talking about some running 16 110s, and I mean they're just trying to make you like give in,
make you quit,
make you quit. So like that battle right there by itself is like, well, I need this job. I didn't graduate yet, so I gotta make it through this. And then even during the season, just some of the different things that I had experienced with my D-line coach, and every single week he would let us know and remind us that those seats you're sitting in are leased. Don't get evicted this week. Like that's the starting statement every single week. And he would tell this on Saturdays sometimes, like the day before the game, So like just being on pins and needles the entire time that season was tough. Like I said, Tuesdays just stressed out, not hoping I don't see a 313 number on my call log because I was afraid I didn't play well enough, right? But experiencing all that also made me respect the craft of just getting better, right? Making sure I understood that, hey, your seat isn't promised tomorrow. You're renting that seat right now, right? So as that could be stressful, in the same breath, it also makes me just take my game to another level and appreciate the opportunity that I have before me to make sure that every single day I put my best foot forward. I got to make sure I'm on top of everything. I got to make sure I'm taking care of my body. I got to make sure I present myself in the right way every single day that I showed up to that facility. Was it tough at times? Most definitely.
Right.
But when I got later in my career, I appreciate those moments because it allowed me to approach this game, this business in a different manner. And I truly believe that's why I was able to be able to play as long as I did, was because of those experiences prior.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like that's just kind of the type of dude you are, right? Like you have this challenge or this thing in your life and you figure out how to work through it to make the best of it. Like where does that come from? Like what is, like, there's a lot of young players out there, like people don't understand that about our league, is that every position, like your 9-to-5 job, like, hey, great, you're doing great work, but there's a lot of people that are just sleeping at their computers and making money, right? But this league, every time the film comes on, the chances of you being fired are great.
Oh, most
you know what I'm saying?
definitely.
So how do you be able to absorb that, understand that, and feel that, and then find this thing inside of you that said, okay, how do I best use this so that I can be better? Like, where did that come from?
Well, it stems from both my parents, right? Both my parents come from Haiti, right? They come from what they call a third world country, and their sole purpose to come to this country was to be able to work.
Mm-hmm.
That opportunity to work, like that's their sole purpose to be here. The opportunity to work, to be able to give back and send money back to Haiti. But when you come to a country and you don't speak the language, you ain't got family here. You're a woman. Like there's a lot of trials and tribulations that you go through, and like just watching my mom and being with my mom, picking me up at midnight, and walking me back home, walking miles and different, like just all the different things. Like what I was going through with the league doesn't compare anything to what she was actually going through to raise me, right? So that's one thing, and then two, my motivation to be able to purchase my mom a house exceeded all of that. You know what I mean? Like if this is what it's gonna take to be able to buy that lady a house, this is what we gonna do. You know what I mean? Because up until I bought my mom a house, I've lived in apartments my entire life.
Got you.
See what I'm saying?
Yep.
So like I never had a front yard. I never had a backyard until I bought my first house for my mama. You know what I mean? So like that motivation by itself, it was going to be worth it on the back end. I just knew I had to weather the storm.
Yeah.
But again, my parents come from a different country, and coming here and being able to figure things out, this is easy. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was tough.
Right.
But in the grand scheme of things, in perspective, it was easy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier that when I played with the Lions in 1997, my dad passed away the night before the first regular season game, and so I ended up, I thought like, my dad would probably be like, hey, boy, go play football. So I tried and got into a fight with Chuck Smith against the Atlanta Falcons, got kicked out at halftime. But then when in the locker room, Mr. Ford came and said, hey, man, like, I have my private jet is at the airport. Just go grab your family, go home. And so it was just awesome that he did that and did that for me and my family. So we got, and his plane stayed with us down in North Carolina until the funeral and everything. It flew us back. Wow. And so I've always felt like, he saw the person in me in that situation. But that was the first time that this mental health thing kind of jumped on my back because about halfway through the season, I was driving home and I just got stuck at the red light. I started crying. I didn't know what was happening. I had to call my wife and be like, yo, can you get a ride to come drive me home? I can't make it. Went to the team, was like, dude, like I'm in the middle of the games thinking about my dad, then the ball snaps. Like I need to talk to somebody. Yeah. And so in the middle of the night, it wasn't a big deal back then, a big thing back then. I went and spoke to this sports psychologist a little bit just to try to help me figure out how to handle the grieving.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And so and then that was like the first real time where this kind of mental health space jumped into my approach to football. Because
I'm sorry to cut you off, but did that help you though? You know what I'm saying? Like talking to that sports psychiatrist, did that help you, or did it just put a Band-Aid on it till the end, to the off season and then got some help? Like,
no, it actually helped because I didn't. Grieving is tough, and people don't. Loss is also a mental health issue. You know what I'm saying? And so I didn't know how to grieve. My dad, I wanted to keep playing football. I didn't want to take time off. I didn't miss any games. I got like the Ed Block Courage Award for our team that year. But I didn't know what to do with these feelings I had. I didn't know how to process them. And so this guy actually had me write a letter to my dad, and it just got all of that stuff out of my system. You know what I'm saying? And then I was able to put it in a place where I could contain it or manage it and still go do my job,
That's interesting because I had something very similar to that in 2016. I lost my dad, and this is a whirlwind. So my old man, one of my best friends, right? This off season, well, typically every off season we would have like a memorial get together. Everyone would drive in to my house in Charlotte, and we'd have family Olympics and all these different things. But this year in particular, we're having my wife was pregnant, and we're having our second boy, so we were having a gender reveal party tied into the family Olympics, and everybody pulled up Friday evening, and I talked to my dad, and he's like, okay, hey. We're on our way. We're probably like an hour or two out. I guess I'm the last one to get there. So it's him and one of my cousins that are driving. And he pulls up, and they pull up, and my cousin's like, "Hey, I need you to come outside." I'm like, "Man, boy, bring your behinds in. We playing cards, whatever. Like, bring it." He's like, "Bro, I think there's a serious problem. Like, come outside." So, but I seen the look in his face. I'm like, "Oh Lord, I know it ain't what I'm thinking."
Right.
Run outside. My dad was slumped over in the passenger seat, and wasn't responsive or anything like that. But the whole time he thought he was just asleep. You know what I mean? So I guess he passed away in his sleep right after I spoke to him, because he's probably like an hour out. So I say all that says, like, so Friday night, I find out my dad passes away. Saturday night, Saturday afternoon, we have a gender reveal of, I'm finding out I'm having a son. So it's like, I lose one Avril, and then I find out I'm having another Avril, right? And then Sunday, we're making funeral arrangements, you know what I'm saying? But then I go through all of that. And then that season rolls around, and it's the first season, like, my old man's not at the opening kickoff and all these different things. But like my grieving process, and I don't know how to grieve. Like, I have a small family. He's the first person to pass in my family. Was one of my best seasons. And I think it was all honestly because I didn't know how to grieve, but I also wasn't thinking of, but like this was my way of not thinking about it.
I got you.
You know what I mean? Yep. Like, this was my way of not thinking about my old man not being around and different things like that. And I had a great season, better season than I had the Pro Bowl year or whatever. But it was tough, and I don't even know if I've ever actually grieved. You know what I mean? Just going through it, but it was just back-to-back things were happening. Because the following year, I go to the Pro Bowl. I have my son. I have all these different things, and then 6 months later, it's the end of my career.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So in about a 2.5-year period, I lose my father. I know I'm having a son. We have the funeral. I have one of my best seasons. I go to the Pro Bowl. And then it's the end of my career.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's just a whirlwind of different things that were going on in my life. And you just learn to deal with it. But also, I think for me, the biggest thing that happened for me once I retired was, one, staying out here because of sense of community. And two, I finally decided to see a therapist.
Right. Yeah.
And once I started seeing a therapist, the stuff with my dad started coming out and pouring out. And then also, obviously, dealing with retiring from football, which is another hard thing for us as athletes, because we've been doing that our whole life.
Yeah. So I read where you said that, and I think you said thanks to your wife. So I don't know if your wife directed you to therapy or she was in therapy and kind of set the way. But what was that like for you? Like, I know when I retired, I always prided myself as being the smartest dude in the locker room. Yeah. I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I retired, all this stuff. And then I retired and couldn't get out of the bed. Like, I was just stuck in the bed. I would get out of the bed, get on the couch, watch SportsCenter, get back in the bed, and turn all the lights off. I had no clue what I was doing. And so because football is a little different than a lot of other sports, right? You can't like retire from the NFL and then go play senior league football.
No.
Somewhere, you can retire from baseball and go play like the senior league baseball or some softball, like all that kind of stuff. But you ain't no too many places you're gonna go where you can still tackle dudes, and block. And so, what was the therapy like, and what was the walk to the therapy?
So I think the big thing for me was, like, I knew my career was over with when that night my injury happened, right? I knew there was a real high possibility that was the end of my career. So what I started doing was I started planting a lot of seeds, right? Whether that was just meeting with different CEOs around the city, all these different things. And then I decided to do my radio, my talk sports radio show or whatever. But the conversation of getting with my therapist was, my wife just suggested it. She's like, "Hey, you ever thought about just seeing a therapist?" And I'm like, "Yeah, in our culture, therapist. What I want to talk to some random person about, Right. But I was blessed to meet our chaplain, Jonathan Rainey, and come to find out he does, some of that stuff as well. And just being able to talk to him from a spiritual standpoint too, it just allowed me to be able to kind of just map things out, because as football players, we're almost taught to keep our thoughts and keep our energy to ourselves.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's weak to show emotions. You know what I mean? And different, which again, there's a fine line because honestly, you can't show too many emotions if you just got a sack. Well, guess what? We got to move on to the next play, right?
Yep.
So it's a fine line and a fine balance between the two. But I also just being able to vent. That's nothing I've ever done in my life before. I've never been able to vent and just be able to say how I felt, talk about my dad, talk about football being gone, talk about marriage, all these different things like it. So once you start putting it out there, now you can actually process and think about it. And I think that was huge for me being able to do that. And I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years of just being able to vent and talk about things just start pouring out, you know what I mean? And you start realizing some of these things are why you process things a certain way. Some of these things are why you talk the way you talk, and just getting some clarity on so many things because football tied up so much of your time. I thought it was huge to be able to get therapy.
Well, let me ask you this question then. As football, like you were saying, there's so much about playing this sport that is positive and rewarding and productive when you're playing football. But there's also part of that programming that when you're done playing football is not helpful at all. So then did the therapy help, for the lack of a better phrase, help deprogram some of the things that we're trained as athletes, like not to show emotion, play through the pain, like, don't share with anybody, like, keep things contained to yourself. Did some of the therapy help, like, help you in some of those areas where?
For sure. I think so. I think the therapy helped me with just even how I communicate with my wife, right? Being able to just tell her how I feel sometimes. Now, I still fall short because that's kind of in my DNA a little bit, but those types of situations help. But I think, honestly, what I use, like the things we learn from football, I have learned to use those things in business. I've learned to use those things in my day-to-day as far as for how I approach things. Because, yes, those things can be, cons of our character in a sense, but a lot of those things also can help you grow in other spaces. Because what I've learned is that stuff also is mental toughness too. It can be mental toughness. It can be detriment to you too if you don't know how to use it. But I think it can be mental toughness in the sense of, I use a lot of analogies in my business now where things don't go your way. Well, guess what? A turnover just happened. Guess what you got to do? You got to knuckle up. You got to put your chin strap on. You got to go out there and try to get a stop. Right. So like I still use those. That mindset to a certain degree, but then on the other side of it has allowed me to be patient with my kids. It has allowed me to be able to talk to my wife in a certain way to make sure that she understands what I'm saying and values what I'm saying, but it's coming from a special place because 10 years ago, I just would have told you how I felt and gone about my business, but now I'm empathizing. You know what I'm saying? So it definitely has helped, but I'm able to use both sides of it, but the mental toughness piece and mental toughness piece, we can, we've definitely used that to grow in a lot of different ways.
I feel you. So we're kind of running out of time here, but I did want to ask you this one other question. How do you think the league now is responding, or just professional sports in general is responding to this mental health space and area?
I think it's cool, right? Because I think it's cool for guys to be able to say what they're going through, because that's the one thing we didn't have. We didn't have, I'm feeling this kind of way mentally. Can I get some help? Like that was what do you mean you feel? What you mean? Boy, get your behind out there and get your hand in the dirt. What you talking? Right. So having that outlet, I think, is huge. I just want to make sure that with anything, both sides can abuse that, right?
Yeah.
You can't just come to work talking about something you just don't feel like doing something today because blah, 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 blah. Because there's really guys that are out here struggling with that, right? Because the more guys that do that and fake the funk, the more the league is going to go the other direction. Like, we can't do this no more, right? But in the same breath, like being able to have a space to do that, if things are really bothering you, if things are, if like you're really thinking, in a negative light, to be able to do that, I think is huge because a lot of guys struggle with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? A lot of guys don't even, like, in our times, we didn't even know there was a name for that.
Right.
Right? We didn't even know you can call that all these different things. So being able to learn more about that and how it affects people, I think is huge. And I think the league is doing a great job of making sure that guys are comfortable being able to say and speak on how they're feeling.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to come on today, Cliff, and really talk a little bit about your journey with the mental health thing, and then also some of the insights. Like you said, like it can be abused on both sides. Like someone can just be playing the game to play the game to stay in the game.
Exactly.
Versus the guys that are really really struggling. And the NFL has a lot more resources now. Like myself, this time last year, I admitted myself to a residential place through the NFL Trust, and I was there for like 32 days. It's a house on 4 acres. 6 former players at a time were there, and they bring all the therapy to you. And like I was dealing with anxiety and panic and depression and all that stuff, and I just couldn't power my way through it. And so I really needed the help. So that's why this then became a thing for me, because there were dudes there that were struggling in silence.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Now before we wrap it up, because I'm still learning about this too, right? Because it's still somewhat new to me, again, because I didn't know you could there was a name for some of the stuff we were going through. But what you were going through, and having the resource to be able to do so, what made you actually pick up the phone and make that call?
Because I'd struggled through it a lot, man. Since retiring, I've struggled with depression, and but then all of a sudden, right before the pandemic, I started having these anxiety attacks and panic attacks. I couldn't get out the door, and so I would just try to muscle my way through it. Or I'm trying to go hang out with my kids. I'm just like, hey, I can't make it over today. I'm not feeling well. And after a while, the kids are like, something's going on with Dad, Well, this time last year, I just hit a breaking point, dude. I had no idea what to do, and so I tried to like get into this one program, and I couldn't get in. And so I thought, well, this is just what my life is going to be. And my ex-wife, to her credit, called Sandy Gregory that used to work with the Seahawks.
Yeah, shout out Sandy.
And Sandy connected me with the people at the trust. And then the trust said, hey, we got this place you can go. And when do you want to go? And I'm like, right now.
Yeah.
And then and so they actually, I said, if one more thing goes wrong, then I'm just going to be this dude for the rest of my life, because I just could not deal with all the stuff and so we get to the airport. And my name is Richard Ray Roberts, but I go by Ray. And so on my ticket they had Ray Roberts, and the dude was like, "Oh, like your ID says Richard. I don't know if you're gonna, dude." Like, and I was like, "Cliff,
don't do this to me. Don't do this to me right now. Not today."
I said, "Hey man, come here." And so he came over. It took everything for me not to just grab his face. And I'm like, "Look, dude, like if I'm not on this plane, like my life depends on me being on this plane. So you have to do whatever you have to do." And he goes, "All right, Mr. Roberts, I'll make it happen." And so he changed my ticket up right there at the counter, which you're not supposed to do, so I can get on the thing. And so it really did change my life, because because then I did use my football stuff. So when I got there, they gave us this big old book about coping skills and all the different things. So, man, I'm going to treat this like 2 days. I'm going to practice one skill in the morning and one skill in the afternoon. And I'm going to do that every day. And then until I found what worked for me.
Yes.
And then, and so that's kind of how I approached it, and just kind of went, it was total 2 days. I didn't care about the other, I care about the other dudes in there, but I didn't care what they thought about me. So I'm like, this is my thing. I need to work this out. So that's kind of how I got there.
No, that's awesome to hear, because I think there's so many quality things that we've learned from the game that we can apply to certain parts of our life that will allow us to have success, to get through situations like that. Because I think the mental toughness piece of it, again, because I think there's a fine line between the two, mental toughness and mental illness, but if we can lean on our mental toughness and understanding how we can get through things, but then being okay with picking up that phone call, hey, because this is not working today. I need to make whatever the situation may be. But that's awesome that you was able to get help, and I think it's awesome that these outlets are just available for guys.
Yes, because
a lot of times, honestly, our identity is just tied into football, and when you lose it, it gets scary out here. Yep. It gets scary. So being able to have those resources, being able to have the league behind you to help you through and weather the storm, that's awesome. And I'm glad to hear that you're in a good space. I'm glad to hear that I'm in a good space. And there's a lot of our brothers out there that do need some help, and we got to be there for them too, to be able to help them out with these issues as well.
Well, absolutely. And I'm glad. Thank you also for asking. Just speaking to the stuff that I was going through, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It was really dark. Like, I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky dude.
Yeah.
And so, I was doing our pregame, postgame show, all this energy, and as soon as I got in my car, dude, it was just like, it was hard. But I appreciate you showing some interest there. And before we leave, you have two, you have your Cliff Avril Family Foundation,
yes, sir,
that brings awareness to type 2 diabetes for
yes,
kids, sir, and education for the youth back in Haiti. And then you also have your Champions of Change basketball game coming up in February. June 23rd. So
yes, sir.
You want to speak to?
Yes. So Cliff Avril Family Foundation, we've been around for 12 years now, 11 years now, something like that. And, that's geared towards juvenile diabetes, but also the education system in Haiti. And we've also branched off now. We have a mentoring program that we do called the Cliffs Crew. I've been mentoring these black and brown boys since they were in 3rd grade. Now they're in 7th and 8th grade. And it's all about exposure. It's all about exposing them to different opportunities that are here in their own backyard. Unfortunately, in our society right now, black and brown boys only see themselves as athletes or entertainers, right? But the odds, as we know, the odds of becoming either one of those is very slim. But did they know that you can be a lawyer and still be part of the Seahawks team? Did they know that you can be an accountant and still be a part of the Seahawks team? Because when they win a Super Bowl, guess what? You get a ring too, right? Exactly. So you help the organization move forward. So I think that's extremely important. You can't dream about things you don't know that exist, right? So that's that. And then we got the Champions of Change. Oh, well, for more information, go to cliffavrilfamilyfoundation.org. And then we have Champions of Change where Michael Bennett, Doug Bowen, and myself, we partnered up to be able to support different local organizations here in the city that are doing some special stuff that don't get enough light shed on to how important they are in the city. Myself in particular, I support the Odessa Brown Clinic, and they've been a staple in the community for a long time. And I think we're hosting a basketball game June 23rd at Climate Pledge Arena. We're gonna have some of your favorite celebs. I hate calling these guys celebs because they all my homies, but we're gonna have some of your favorite celebs around the city that are gonna be there to support. We got Marshawn that's gonna be a coach. We got Sue Bird, she's gonna be a coach. Gary Payton's gonna be a coach again this year. So it's gonna be a great time, and it's all about bringing families together as well. And it's all for a great cause to be able to support all those organizations that we support and want to shed light on, so people can support them as well.
Well, that's awesome, man. You've always been a great community dude, and it's cool when you're able to give back, and you get to be really specific when you give back versus just kind of in general. So doing a lot of great stuff. Thank you again for joining the show with us. If you're struggling with mental health and whether it's stress, anxiety, panic, whatever, reach out to your local, to your medical providers for help and guidance and support. To get the help you need. And then 2, know that it's okay to not be okay. Mm-hmm. And then 3, when you need help and you ask for help, you're operating from a position of strength. Yes. And so a lot of people think it's a weakness to ask for help, but it's actually a strength and power to ask for help. Thank you for listening to Big Ray's Garage Grind Mental Health Edition. And thank you, again, Cliff, for jumping on. You can find me also on Twitter at Big Ray Roberts and on Instagram at ThatDude072. So be good and peace.